Part 2. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I can handle critical comments from others. One thing that's clear is that there's no one-size-fits-all formula for success in navigating this challenging situation. I'm unsure about how many of the points Weston made will prove to be accurate, but the list was enlightening. I truly appreciate your insights. I believe that men and women often have different ways of thinking, and it's valuable to hear a woman's perspective. I agree that this wasn't a love affair. It appears to have been purely based on lust, driven by easy opportunities and poor decision-making, frankly, terrible decisions. To be honest, my wife frequently receives attention from younger men, but I agree that the other person involved doesn't seem interested in starting a new family with her, given our 3 young children and my 35-year-old self. If this affair remains hidden, it's unlikely to be motivated by deep, enduring love or a desire for a long-term life together. I appreciate your input on the idea of polyamory. I still intend to pursue it, possibly on multiple occasions. However, my wife is currently unaware of this, and it remains uncertain whether she will be open to the idea. If she declines, that will be the end of that plan. I've been presented with numerous opportunities to be unfaithful while traveling, and I'm certain more will come my way. So far, I haven't given in, but I understand the temptation and how difficult it can be to resist. Those who spend a significant amount of time away from their loved ones in hotel rooms can relate to the loneliness that can creep in. If you're fortunate enough to sleep in your own bed every night, consider yourself blessed. It's not an excuse for infidelity, but rather a recognition of the challenges faced by those in such situations. In my view, if I were to have taken any of these opportunities, it wouldn't signify a lack of love for my wife or that I wouldn't have enjoyed the experience. It would mean that I was vulnerable, struggled to maintain boundaries, and had a weakness in that aspect of myself. Tonight or over the weekend, I plan to engage in another lengthy conversation with my wife, during which I aim to establish clear expectations for her response. I couldn't agree more. I've walked in your shoes, having traveled internationally for 5 years. I understand exactly what you're going through. Despite leaving a high-paying job when I got married 10 years ago, I still despise airports, airplanes, lonely hotel rooms, job-related stress, and jet lag, to name a few. I even loathe the distinct smell associated with it all. As social creatures, long-distance separations can have a profound impact on us. They expose us to unexpected temptations at times. Some individuals compromise their integrity and fall into these traps, thinking they won't get caught. It's crucial to recognize that such actions have nothing to do with their love for their spouses. No matter how your wife presents herself to you, she is aware that she has made a significant mistake and deeply regrets it. Perhaps she had grown too complacent in her life and lost sight of how fortunate she was. You can choose to stand firm, make your stance clear, and provide her with the necessary documentation to teach her a lesson. You may consider exposing the affair in a way that is both humiliating and shocking, so she can feel repulsed by the other man who engaged in the wrongdoing with her. This can serve as a wake-up call, shattering the illusion of romance. However, once she becomes open and meets your expectations while genuinely striving to mend the relationship, you may contemplate reconciliation in the future. It's important to acknowledge that she didn't plan to cheat on you. She succumbed to temptation in a lonely hotel room and found it difficult to stop once it began. It wasn't love. She didn't think clearly about what she was getting into. She is the one who displayed weakness. I hope she gains clarity, sets aside her pride, and implores for your forgiveness and mercy, not solely for the sake of her job, but as a humane gesture for the sake of a long-term life partnership, whether you choose to keep her in your life or not. My wife has willingly shared all her passwords with me. I suspect she anticipated my desire for them. However, now that I have access to them, they seem quite pointless, except perhaps as a demonstration of her willingness to be transparent. This woman earns a substantial income well into six figures, and she's not unintelligent. If she were to continue any secretive communication, I doubt it would occur on platforms or accounts for which I have the passwords. Both of them are likely aware that their company has the capability to monitor their company-owned equipment, especially given the size of the organization where she works. My top priority right now is to notify the other man's wife promptly. It appears that the best approach is either to do it in person myself or to involve my wife and have her do it while I'm on the phone with her. I agree that his wife could potentially expose their affair to their company, but I suspect she wouldn't want her high-achieving husband to lose his job. I'm attempting to compile a list of questions similar to what we did, but every time I begin to jot them down, my anger gets the best of me. At this juncture, what I'm firmly convinced of is that my wife isn't in love with the other man. This places me a step ahead in the process of potential reconciliation. She insists she hasn't had any contact with him since the night she was at her girlfriend's house, and she claims that the other man is fully aware that their involvement is over. The pressing question is whether it's over for good or for how long this hiatus will last. That's what I need to determine. I haven't yet disclosed this situation to either her parents or mine, except for my brother. My sisters at this point would react quite strongly if they were informed. If I decide not to pursue divorce, I believe that involving all of them in this matter right now would only complicate our family life in the future. If divorce becomes the choice, there will be ample time to share the full details with them. I want to clarify that my wife isn't just having a good time amidst all this. She's sleeping alone, devoid of any physical touch or affection from me. While I'm not entirely certain about the concept of the 180, I believe I'm naturally leaning in that direction. Her tears aren't having a substantial impact on me. This weekend, I plan to delve into the whys from her perspective, although I'm not sure if it really matters. Up to this point, despite some rather strong words from me, she hasn't lashed out or blamed me in any way. I've communicated my desire for a written timeline by tomorrow, and I believe she's currently working on it and fully engrossed in the process. We'll see if it aligns with what she shared under pressure. I'm fortunate that I'm not much of a drinker. The why question serves a specific purpose, for you to ascertain that she has recognized and resolved the underlying issues, making her a trustworthy partner for potential reconciliation. Allow me to share my own example involving my wayward wife so that you can better comprehend the reasons behind her need to discover her why or character gap. Initially, her responses to why included statements such as, "I didn't mean to," "It was a mistake," and "Things got out of hand." These responses can be seen as excuses. Further questioning about why led to answers like, "You were traveling too much," "You didn't give me enough attention," and "You weren't emotionally connected enough." These responses shift blame. Continuing to probe with why resulted in answers like, "I felt lonely," "I enjoyed sharing common interests," and "I liked our conversations." These responses represent progress. Deeper exploration through more why questions brought out responses such as, "I enjoyed the attention," "It made me feel good about myself," and "I liked it because he approved of me." At this point, an individual counselor suggested that it could be related to approval or attention addiction and began working on establishing boundaries. However, this was insufficient as within a year she had another affair. Further inquiry into the why questions revealed responses like, "Nothing was ever good enough for my mum, and I felt worthless, and my dad was withdrawn, and I couldn't gain his approval." Delving even deeper, it became apparent that both her mum and dad had also struggled with feelings of inadequacy and never quite measuring up to their own fathers. My wife had inherited a legacy of not feeling good enough and lacking her father's approval, creating a deep-seated need for attention and approval from men. She had been using affairs as a way to self-medicate against the emotional pain she had carried since childhood, That, in essence, was the true why. However, this revelation is only one part of the solution. My wife needed to work on rebuilding her self-esteem. She also had to recognize the recurring patterns in her life, understanding that seeking attention from other men not only failed to bring fulfillment, but also jeopardized her marriage. She had to completely reframe her perspective on men and establish new boundaries. The why served as a catalyst for profound internal changes. It's when the why becomes the driving force for meaningful transformation. With all that said, asking her why this weekend is unlikely to yield substantial insights. The journey to discover the real why can take weeks or even months of dedicated effort, typically with the guidance of a skilled individual counselor. Even after uncovering the core reasons, it will require a significant effort to overcome old habits and thought patterns while establishing new, healthier ones. I believe that this weekend would be most productive if you focus on definitively ending the affair, outlining the next steps for each of you, and exploring the book How to Help Your Spouse Heal from Your Affair by Linda McDonald. It's a straightforward read and is available in book format. Additionally, if you search for it online, you can find a PDF version. I'd like to address 2 key points. Except for promptly informing the other man's wife to minimize his potential manipulation of the situation, there's no urgency for immediate action tomorrow. It's important to take the time needed for thoughtful reflection. Sometimes, the rush to advocate for an immediate divorce seems to stem from a sense of pride. Personally, I spent 3 months contemplating marriage before saying yes, and I would require a similar period to decide on a divorce unless the situation demanded swift action. It's crucial not to react solely out of shock. I share your perspective regarding the job situation. It's a common topic of discussion in these situations. The wayward spouse often needs to change jobs if the other man or other woman is a co-worker. In your husband's case, with a PhD, job opportunities aren't readily available. Disrupting the lives of your children by moving them would be highly challenging. While he took measures to minimize contact with the other woman, and it was only an emotional affair, it wasn't reasonable to expect him to leave his job. It's worth noting that she made the move within the company, and the likelihood of her crossing paths with your husband is now significantly reduced. Please take good care of yourself, and don't feel pressured to make any hasty decisions while you navigate through this challenging time. You will be all right. I'd like to commend you for your decisiveness and prompt actions. I truly wish I could have been as swift in my decision-making. Back then, I did consider it a potential deal-breaker, but my financial situation and my role as a stay-at-home mum to 4 small children made it very difficult to act. If he had been financially capable of supporting me and the kids separately, I would have taken that step. Well done to you. Thank you for your kind words. Your post was genuinely eye-opening and informative. I'm truly grateful for it. I suspect I'll encounter some, if not all, of the responses that you've received. I've already dismissed the term mistake. I told her that the first instance might be seen as somewhat of a mistake, although I didn't buy into it. But any subsequent occurrences were no mere mistakes. Forgetting my toothbrush when I traveled, that was a mistake. I appreciate your support. If I hear anything like, I have feelings for him, or I love him too, or if she refuses to end this, or hasn't already, I will move forward with divorce swiftly, like a speeding train. I understand your perspective. It's not common to find many men, or women for that matter, who wouldn't consider infidelity a deal-breaker. It seems like there are quite a few people here who had initial doubts about that stance. In your case, finances are not a concern. I can only imagine how challenging this situation must be with small children. The other man is likely going to discover that soon. It's unclear whether your wife is concerned about whether you intend to inform his wife or if she thinks you're primarily focused on his job and the affair. At the moment, I'm adopting a possum approach, deliberately not giving any hints about other man's family life. I don't have much time right now, but I have no reservations about informing other man's wife. He effectively did it for me. Interestingly, Mr. Pretty Boy appeared to be so anxious about my potential involvement with their HR department, as my wife couldn't provide any details about my intentions. This prompted him to confess to his wife voluntarily. I'll give him credit for that. Anyway, yesterday, my wife received a call from other man's wife on her personal cell phone. Can you guess who it was? Other man's wife, who was understandably very upset. My wife was left practically speechless and didn't have much of a chance to apologize or explain. Then she requested to speak with me, and my wife handed me the phone. I genuinely sympathize with her. She conveyed her apologies for her husband's intrusive actions in my life and expressed hope that I would find it within my heart not to expose their situation at work, emphasizing that she's a stay-at-home mum with no means of supporting her children. She assured me that her husband is remorseful and has agreed to maintain no contact while doing everything possible to avoid her in case they have to attend the same meetings. Listening to her tears, her pain, and her concerns for her young children left me feeling somewhat shaken. So it seems there may be no need for a private investigator to notify other man's wife. Additionally, it's evident that she has a decent income and could live independently, albeit perhaps not at the same luxurious level you both enjoyed as a couple. This might be contributing to her sense of entitlement. I went through a similar experience over 16 years ago, although my children were younger than yours at the time. In the years since our divorce, I've learned more about infidelity than I would like to admit. However, something about your situation is troubling me. If I understand this correctly, your wife appears to rationalize extramarital relationships as acceptable, even something she might feel entitled to. It also appears that she earns a good living and could sustain herself, although it might not match the affluent lifestyle you both enjoyed as a couple, potentially fueling her sense of entitlement. Based on the details you've shared in your story, it appears you have a limited number of options at your disposal to ascertain the outcomes necessary for your decision-making process regarding reconciliation or divorce. One such option is exposure, but not at her workplace. A reliable way to gauge her sincerity in pursuing reconciliation is to request that she openly discuss her actions with your children, her family, and your family, ideally with you present. The second option is to initiate divorce proceedings. I understand your hesitancy to embark on this path and potentially not turn back, but I've witnessed many instances on these forums where this approach proved effective in compelling the wayward spouse to commit to reconciliation and snap out of the fog. I waited for over 4 months for my wife, wayward ex-wife, to undertake what I'm proposing, and until I filed for divorce, she didn't show any inclination to act. After I initiated the divorce process, she was prepared to make amends, but by that point, I had reached my limit and proceeded with the divorce. Considering everything you've shared about your wife, her mindset, and her occupation, these may be the most effective cards you have to play in order to gauge her true commitment to your marriage. On a side note, you mentioned not being entirely sure about the entitlement mindset, as it's still early in your exploration of the situation. However, you've read that women with higher incomes and social status are more likely to cheat if they have the opportunity, possibly for the reasons I outlined. It's worth noting that women initiate more divorces than men, and this increase could indeed be linked to their reduced reliance on men for financial security. It seems like you have more digging and soul-searching ahead of you. Your wife's current feelings of remorse are warranted, given the circumstances. I still don't have the comprehensive timeline, but she's in the process of putting it together. I'm also continuing to work on identifying the specific details I want to uncover, as well as considering what I might prefer not to know. Currently, my negative feelings toward the other man have somewhat lessened. My primary concern is my wife, not the other man. That's where my focus needs to be. I believe you should call her at home when you know other man is at work and verify that it was indeed his wife who called. If it turns out to be her, she will likely understand your need for confirmation. I understand your doubts. I've been part of this forum for quite some time, and the phone call does raise some concerns. It wouldn't be the first time that another man has asked a friend or a relative to call the betrayed husband and claim to be his wife, stating knowledge of the affair. The fact that she called your wife and then requested to speak to you might not hold much significance. I recommend calling her at home when you're certain that other man is at work to verify whether it was indeed his wife who made the call. If it turns out to be her, she should understand your need for confirmation. However, if it wasn't her, then it's crucial for her to learn the truth about her marriage. I understand that you've previously mentioned that you haven't considered outing other man to his wife. However, unless you're taking extra precautions while browsing this website, it's possible that your wife knows about your presence here and has read your posts. The fact that other man's betrayed wife was emotional and discussing their children still doesn't hold significant weight unless you can confirm with certainty that it was he. Thank you for sharing your intentions. It's reasonable to assume it was his wife based on the phone number with digits almost identical to other man's, except for the last digit. My wife would have no reason to suspect that I've been exploring infidelity websites. We haven't had any conversations in which I mentioned needing advice from anyone. It would be unwise for my wife to read the advice I've received on here. Frankly, if she had read any of the guidance I've been given so far, I think she would have said something to tip her off. I'll exercise caution, though. Thanks for the warning. Trust me, I may not be an infidelity expert, but I'm far from being foolish. I'm accustomed to handling significant financial negotiations and exchanges. If the person on the phone wasn't his wife, considering what she said, they must have rehearsed extensively. Coupled with the proximity of the phone numbers, I'm quite confident it was her. I plan to call her next Wednesday just to be absolutely sure, and other man better be present at that meeting. If I were in your shoes, I would still meet with other man's wife. I can assure you that you'll uncover more truth from her. You have every right to know the facts, and it's crucial to understand them in order to address this crisis. Have you ever considered visiting other man's house with your wife, so all four of you can sit down and compel the cheaters to confront their harsh reality together? I guarantee that the story you'll hear in a four-person meeting will be quite different from what you've heard from your wife or other man's wife. Trust me, the four-way meeting may not be the most elegant or high-class approach, but it's the most effective way to shake the cheater's mindset. They will pledge never to repeat their actions. To build something new, you need to tear down all the sins and delusions. Thank you. If other man were anywhere near me, I'd have put my wife in the car and insisted that she face the music in person. Other man's wife has my contact information, and I do intend to make another effort to have a thorough conversation with her when he's at the business meeting next week that my wife was involved in. Other man is also expected to attend the business meeting. If I don't feel comfortable with the situation, I might consider hiring a private investigator to confirm her identity, although my instinct tells me she is who she claims to be. The more I explore the information here, especially given the circumstances of our out-of-town travel, I'm starting to sense that I might not be able to avoid the polygraph route. Currently, I'm also contemplating whether this was the only extramarital involvement. You're making progress. It takes time for some to come to terms with these difficult situations. I'm considering telling the kids. It's the next step in exposing the truth. She won't be able to justify her actions to them. She remains deeply involved and is more concerned with him than with you and your marriage. Reconciliation isn't viable under these circumstances. People may look at Space Ghost, but was just as effective. He took the step of vacating the marital bedroom. He asked her to leave. He temporarily moved out himself. He reached out to the other betrayed spouse. He contacted the charity where the other man and wayward wife were involved and exposed the situation there. He convinced her to cease her involvement in the charities. Exposing the situation to the 3 oldest children also took place. You've already taken several of these steps, but completing the list is crucial for making progress or deciding on your next course of action. You're making your way through this challenging situation. It's uncertain whether you've reached the end point, but you're determined to find out. She has moved out of the bedroom, but you don't want her to leave at this point. You wish to monitor her actions closely and be able to ask questions when necessary. I have no intention of leaving the house. While the approach was effective, my wife wasn't essentially playing house 4 days a week, so it feels a bit different in my case. I started reading Space Ghost's story, and it's clear that he endured months of facing the situation before taking action. Personally, I would have hired a private investigator much earlier, and I'm prepared to do so now if necessary. The other betrayed spouse has already reached out to me, so that part is resolved. I will be in contact with her again. From what I've gathered, Prt2 seems to be in save his family mode. I've already addressed my wife's job situation. I don't want her to quit her job. It's a matter of either keeping her actions in check or facing the consequences as a divorced woman. There's no middle ground. However, it's too early to determine the outcome on that front. I'm not planning to inform my kids or other family members at the moment. Primarily, this is because I don't have all the facts, and I'm uncertain about the likely outcome. If I were to tell my kids that their mum was involved with another man and then decided not to divorce, it might create unnecessary shame, especially for her. Rest assured, she's not feeling proud at this time, since she won't be attending the meeting next week and I won't be traveling either. I've informed her that I expect to receive the timeline. As for the comment about other man's wife, it appears that the young man was pursuing something with your older wife. It seemed like an easy target. She may have initiated the connection, or at least made it clear that she was open to it, if not openly propositioning him. I couldn't help but chuckle when I read the phrase low-hanging fruit in reference to my wife. It's not a description I'd expect from most people looking at her, but I understand the point being made. I've obtained the timeline and there weren't any significant surprises. It all started with instant attraction and mild flirting at the first meeting he attended after his promotion. Interestingly, my wife was the one who made the first move. She was thrilled that this handsome man, whom all the other women were admiring, was focusing on her. She relished the attention. In total, there were 6 hookups, and I've documented the dates. The most painful one to hear about was when they had the audacity for him to fly to my hometown while I was away, and they spent nearly 2 days in a hotel without emerging. Their communication wasn't particularly explicit. They were cautious, with only a few extremely explicit messages that I won't go into detail about, as I'm sure you can imagine what they said to each other. Notably, there was no mention of love or a desire to be together. Other man doesn't come across as a predator. In fact, he seemed to be going along with the situation, and my wife mentioned that he felt quite guilty about the entire affair. This explains why he eventually confessed to his wife when he became scared. The details about their sexual encounters were incredibly difficult to listen to. The first time I had a bit of a breakdown, but she answered all my questions. I'm not sure anyone wants to hear all the graphic details. They did use protection. In fact, my wife purchased condoms before their first intimate encounter, as she knew it was likely to happen if things progressed that far. It was a very unpleasant revelation, as you can imagine. She insists there are no hidden email accounts or secret apps, and that he doesn't possess any explicit photos of her. The extent of their online activity was limited to some phone SX, and it appears she was cautious and not reckless, which aligns with her typical demeanor. No contact, achieving total. No contact is challenging, but it's somewhat easier than if they were co-located in the same workplace. They hold similar positions but in different geographical regions, have different teams reporting to them, and different superiors, so there should be no necessity for them to communicate through company email or text. Monitoring this is indeed a difficult task, but the only times they might find themselves in the same time zone are during select meetings. Some they sign up for, while others they can avoid each other. She has committed to this, and she has drafted a no-contact communication. The communication was firm and devoid of emotion, and I didn't find any issues with it. However, I'm uncertain if it's even necessary to send it. He already knows that I know, and his wife, almost certainly, has informed me that she is aware. So, do I still need to have her send it, or is her writing it without hesitation sufficient? I'd appreciate opinions on this matter. We now have transparency, but what does that really entail? There are times when we lead separate lives, which is part of the problem. It's practically impossible for me to monitor everything closely. She's not resigning from her job, as I've already stated the reasons why I don't want her to. However, she will send out some feelers. She's becoming weary of all the travel. Another positive aspect of her job is that it appears other man is highly ambitious, and she thinks if he doesn't advance relatively quickly, he'll pursue other opportunities. We still have a lot more issues to address. I understand this is getting lengthy and perhaps tiresome, so for now, here's a recap. 1. I'm leaning much more towards reconciliation than divorce now. 2. She is starting to grasp it, but she needs to explain her mindset more to me. 3. I believe I have uncovered at least 90% of the truth regarding other man and her. 4. We haven't addressed whether there are any other affairs or if this has happened before. I'll explore that. 5. I'm committed to verifying other man's wife next week. Count on it. 6. I haven't broached the subject of a polygraph test yet. I want to wait until I've had more discussions with her about all her activities while on the road. I currently see no better option to make me feel secure, and I believe she would agree to it at this point. If she refused, it would be a game changer. 7. I do believe she loves me, but I need to understand why she crossed that line, a line that any of us might approach at some point, but usually refrain from crossing. 8. I did cancel a significant trip we had planned for rest and relaxation. There are no rewards right now for engaging in an affair. I might consider asking her to go away to a nice place where we can be alone without distractions. All I can say is that this situation is incredibly challenging. I've read about other situations on this platform, and it's truly bewildering that this happens to so many people. What is happening out there? If you're still reading this lengthy account I've written, thank you for your concern and assistance. As for the issue of the other man, POS, it seems like he doesn't care much for his family, and it appears that his wife is already in reconciliation mode, so he isn't facing significant consequences for his affair. I'm not entirely sure I agree with you on this one. He clearly didn't care enough to avoid engaging in an affair, but at the moment, it appears he cared enough about his family not to obstruct his wife from contacting mine. I know I need to verify this, but currently, I believe it was her. His wife is in a difficult situation without a job and 3 children. I wouldn't say they're well on the road to reconciliation, but her immediate options are far more limited than mine. Sorry, but the words of cheaters mean nothing. In my opinion, she really needs to take a polygraph test. I agree with this. I haven't brought it up yet, but it's on the horizon. In fact, I think I'll need to do it more than once. First, to verify what I've been told, and then at some point down the line. From my limited time here, it seems that sometimes a wayward wife repeats this behavior if they believe the coast is clear, either with the same other man, probably not likely here if his wife checks things out, or with a new other man. My wayward wife has had, and I'm sure still has, many opportunities, as do I. I see no other way to rebuild trust. Maybe your wayward wife was influenced by toxic friends who need to be cut off before considering reconciliation, but the final decision was hers. I agree with this as well. Right now, I know that 3 of her girlfriends are aware, one of whom should be removed from her life for good before considering reconciliation, and 2 who distanced themselves from her rather than facing me, knowing what was going on. I haven't addressed this yet, but I will. I want to find out who else might be aware of the situation, especially if I'm at dinner with them. While I'm not pleased with the 2 who distanced themselves, they certainly didn't encourage her actions. I'll need to deal with them as well. Currently, I'm not inclined to expose this to their HR. Oddly enough, most of my anger is still directed at my wife, not him. Even though she's been referred to as low-hanging fruit, my wife's appearance might have made her an appealing target for any man who crossed that boundary. I understand that your wife was initially reluctant to get tested for STDs, and she claims that condoms were always used. However, it's crucial to insist that she gets tested regardless. Even if condoms were used during intercourse, the risk remains for other forms of sexual activity, such as oral sex and kissing. She could still have been exposed to potential health risks. I'm glad to hear that you've been tested, and I appreciate your willingness to send the no-contact email. Establishing this boundary is an important step in the process. If you need any further support or have more questions, feel free to reach out. You're welcome. I appreciate your understanding regarding the low-hanging fruit reference. It's good to hear that you're not offended, and I agree that it seems to be an accurate analogy in this situation. Prior to their meeting, she had already heard from female colleagues about how attractive he was. It's not uncommon for women in their 40s to appreciate the attention they receive from younger men. I do have reservations about her moral values, which go beyond what might have initially seemed like a one-time validation affair. While I'm relatively new here, my doubts regarding her moral choices persist. Your wife's response to his attention seems to have boosted her self-esteem and confidence. My wife undoubtedly made some terrible and painful decisions recently. However, I find it a bit extreme to label her as morally bankrupt and beyond redemption. I truly appreciate your concern and respect your opinions, as well as the help and support from everyone here during this challenging time. I might choose to divorce or reconcile, but I must acknowledge that despite this morally reprehensible act, my wife has been the mother of 2 outstanding children, a dedicated worker for most of their lives, achieved significant success in her career, and, up until now, made this regrettable choice with only one person. This chapter in our lives is far from over, and there are more answers to be discovered. To paint her entire character in such negative terms feels a bit harsh, in my opinion. I've noticed in this forum that many wives are involved with other men besides their husbands, and some choose to divorce while others do not, even in cases of multiple instances of infidelity. Fortunately, I'm not in that situation yet. As for those who attempt to undermine your progress or question the efforts your wife has made, they haven't walked in your shoes. You strike me as a well-balanced, intelligent, and thoughtful individual who doesn't rush into things recklessly. Trust your instincts. You're welcome for the encouragement. The uncertainty of how this will all conclude is still looming, but it's reassuring to hear that there's hope for our potential reconciliation. My wife's attitude has shifted significantly since I confronted her about the affair, although it doesn't mean I won't face additional challenges down the road, as some others on this forum are currently experiencing. I'm not an expert in handling this situation, I'm simply doing the best I can. The easiest logistical step would be to serve her with divorce papers, but throughout my life, I've learned that the easiest route isn't always the most productive one. We will continue to have conversations every night this week. I understand that this isn't a quick fix situation unless you choose to walk away. I'm not at that point yet, but for those who might be concerned that I'm being too soft, you can rest assured I'm not begging, I'm not pleading, and I'm not trying to be the nicest person on the planet. My wife knows this, and she understands the situation she's dealing with in me. I'll admit that reading some of these horror stories makes my situation seem less severe if it weren't happening to me. I'm not one to indulge in self-pity, and I'm determined to get to the bottom of this one way or another, and it won't take me years. I've already begun looking into polygraph testing facilities. I believe my wife will be willing to take the test, and I trust she will pass. I'm not naive enough to think that there might not be some small detail she hasn't shared or something I won't be thrilled to hear. I'll give her the opportunity to disclose any such information herself before I request the polygraph. I apologize for the confusion. I didn't mean to imply she was morally bankrupt in every aspect. My concern was more related to her attitudes about cheating. I've noticed that some individuals have unconventional outlooks on infidelity and may have deep-seated beliefs they never express. Initially, I thought she might fall into that category because it's rare for someone who thinks cheating is wrong to openly suggest continuing to do it. People who want to engage in cheating but also believe it's wrong usually agree to stop, rather than express a desire to continue. It's possible that her perspectives on sexual, romantic and commitment issues are separate from her other attitudes and beliefs. Perhaps using the term basic morals was misleading. I was primarily focused on how her views on right and wrong regarding cheating might differ significantly from the norm, particularly her belief that it's just about sex, so it's okay. I didn't take offense, no worries. That's great to hear that the polygraph process worked for you and your wife passed all the questions. It does indeed serve the purposes you mentioned, incentivizing the wayward spouse to be honest and providing a gauge of their truthfulness based on their responses. Regarding exposing the situation to their HR, it seems you've made a decision not to go down that route at this point. It's understandable, as you're focusing on addressing the issues in your relationship without involving their workplace. I understand your perspective, and you've made a clear case for your decision. Exposing the affair to HR would have significant consequences for all parties involved, and it's important to consider the potential impact on your wife, the other betrayed spouse, and their families. Your focus on making choices that prioritize healing your marriage and protecting your children is a valid approach. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and I respect your decision. I appreciate your perspective as someone with experience and understanding of the circumstances. You've raised valid points about the complexities of the situation, and I respect your support for the choices made. You prioritize minimizing harm to your children and working towards repairing your marriage, which is a thoughtful approach. Thank you for sharing your insights. If you choose to reconcile, I believe you will appreciate the decisions you've made, and if you opt for divorce, you still have the flexibility to explore different options. I understand that some advice given here may be rooted in personal experiences, and it might not align with your unique situation. I wish you the best of luck and hope for your healing and well-being.